Hello and welcome, fright fanatics, to this, the Horror Story Corner, where tonight we have another completely original terror tale written by one of our listeners. It concerns a child by the name of Susan, a child who is curious about the world and is a seeker of secret things. Imagine her joy, then, when she finds something old, impossibly old, with the key to knowledge beyond one's wildest imagination. But what is the price of knowing such? Only a small trinket, a tear, and a one-way trip into the Horror Story Corner. I hope you enjoy. I Show You All the Secret Things by Stephen Sinclair. 1. Susan was the odd one out at school, considered by the other kids as a bit weird. She was small for her age and had a sharp-featured, piquant, rather than a pretty face. At 15, she was still all up and down. As one of the boys wittily put it, as flat as an ironing board. So she didn't attract much attention from that direction. All her clothes were slightly out of date, as was her phone. This also tended to put the popular girls off. More importantly, people sensed that she didn't seem to need friends. Her online profile was non-existent. This was considered very weird. She did well in school. Her favourite subjects were English and history. This was because they were all about stories. Stories told you things, let you find things out. One story was always flowing into another, if you were able to see how they were all connected. Knowing things, finding things out, was Susan's obsession. Always had been. Women, of course, feel as much passion and lust as men, and about finding things out, she had proper hunger. She was in real earnest. Before running off with her boyfriend 3 years before the girl had been a complete mystery to her mother, Susan's mother was what was called in the 90s a party girl. In her 20s, someone had once described her as a high street honey. What to make of her child who collected coloured stones and found out what they were called in her dad's encyclopedia, and who got excited when she spotted 1872 carved on the front of an old house, was beyond her. She once remarked to a friend, with no conscious unkindness, "She's not a princess type of a girl." Exactly what her mum had been doing married to Susan's father, who was an accountant and a fan of cryptic crosswords, was perhaps the only mystery Susan didn't like to think about. Still, she sometimes missed her mother, but no one, including her father, could ever have guessed this. A good day for Susan was off on her bike, discovering new places. Places she'd never seen before were secrets she'd found out. She liked to look under stones to see what was there. For her, this was almost as good as books. Only almost. She loved books. Books told you things. A very good day might involve an old book she really liked, discovered in a charity shop. Even better if she found written inside, "To Gran, Christmas, 1927. She liked to find out the exact meaning of words. She'd been delighted when she discovered what the word occult actually meant. In bed that night, she'd reflected that it didn't mean silly people who drew stars and danced around with no clothes on. "I'm an occultist," she'd proudly said aloud in the darkness of her room. Perhaps here an annoying aside is needed to fully illustrate what she was like. In social studies, the teacher asked the kids to give examples of why racism was a stupid idea. This being rural Yorkshire, and a few years ago, all the kids were white. They all gave similar, rather embarrassed, rather earnest replies. Those who said anything. Except Susan, of course. Although she rarely spoke out, this had interested her. She said she didn't think there was anything special about white people, because if someone called Alexander the Great had lived to be an old man, there might not, long after, have been an industrial revolution. She'd been going on to say other things, like how important very difficult strategy games like international drafts were in parts of Africa. But it all came out wrong. She got laughed at. She had, of course, fallen into several traps here, not least being she annoyed the teacher by being too clever. Also fallen foul of the fallacy that if you know about something, you must actually subscribe to it. Finally, and perhaps worst of all for a girl, she'd gone against the unspoken tenet. We're just as clever as the boys, but never, never must we talk like one of the boys who's into science and the chess club and stuff. Never. It must be said that she wasn't actively badly bullied. Although skinny, she was wiry from all the time she spent outdoors. She could and would fight back, and she didn't cry very much, or easily. Never had. Not even in primary school. Mostly, she was treated with the mild, slightly amicable contempt reserved for those who disturb others in ways they can't quite put their finger on. Those whose passions they can't share or understand. 2. It was a really hot day, and she was exploring a footpath that ran between two long but thin belts of trees and rankly thick undergrowth. It was about 3 or 4 miles from her house. She dumped her bike back at the roadside fence. The figure simply appeared beside the path. It was very tall and had a face made of what looked like a perfect oval of crumpled leaves. The face was flat, largely featureless. In places there were gaps, and she could see through to the other side. The face seemed to shift and crawl. The thing's mouth was simply a straight twig. For eyes, a small white stone, and a large snail's shell. Somehow, these contrived to study her intently. There was no nose. It was at least 8 feet tall. Sometimes, in bad weather, when she looked out into her back garden and up at the dales, you couldn't tell where the clouds began or the mist ended, as it flowed down over the hills. The thing's body looked to be made of stuff like this, or perhaps it was clothed in it. She couldn't tell. Although there was no wind, some small pieces of the grey-black nothingness seemed to blow away in an unfelt breeze. Immediately, the moment she saw the thing, him, part of her mind cried. Somehow she knew it was male. There was a strange doubling inside her mind which was infinitely worse than mere fear. Part of her mind screamed that the thing was natural. Natural! That it belonged here far more than the trees and grass. There was the strong feeling it had much more right to be there than she ever could. At the same time, in the same moment, part of her screamed inside of her head, supernatural being, insisting that what she was looking at not only could not be, but must not be. Sometimes, when she walked in places like this, she stepped on things that snapped. Sometimes immediately, sometimes after a little pressure. This, she knew, was happening to her mind. What made it even more horrible was that the feeling wasn't unpleasant. Absently, the creature made a small gesture in the air. Immediately the pressure in her mind eased. Incredibly, Susan found she felt calm. She studied the hand which appeared to float in thin air. The hand was made of crumpled, withered leaves. It spoke. "I have watched you for some time. I have become interested in you. I will show you all the secret things. I have been here for a very, very long time. I know all the here-ness of here. I will show you wonderful things. Secret, secret things." It paused for a moment. The face continued to move, and yet the eyes were still intensely gazing at her. "I only ask for some little things, small things. I cannot make them myself." Another hand appeared from nowhere, clenched into a fist. It slowly opened. In the palm lay glittering gem-like things. Somehow she immediately knew they were human tears. "It's only a small payment, and in return you will not only have what you desire, but you will be known among your kind forever and always, in the always of you. At least, in the always of humans." Then there were a series of images inside her head, places she knew, some she didn't. And she also felt the places, felt how she'd felt when she was last there. The rain that day in St. Mary's churchyard in the village, looking at old gravestones, so old they were little more than shapeless lumps. The hotel in the village, where you always smelt beer when you walked past. An old house she'd always wondered about. What was hidden inside? Other places, and always the promise of a hidden revelation, just tantalizingly out of reach. "The here-ness of here is very great," it said. She knew she would be free to walk away. She knew she could. She didn't. He began to speak. Time seemed to stop. There were only the creature's words. Then the images began to form in her head. 3. Long, long ago, long even for me, creatures who lived on a world that goes around another star sent an artifice to this world. They took images of the world. They were going to change the air so they could use it as one of their homes. This made me angry, so I snatched the thing from the sky and smashed it into the skin of the world. I was young and strong then, and I tore the images from nothingness. I have kept the artifice nearby. I will show you where it is, and you will be able to show the others that creatures live by other stars and be famed forever and always. A brief image of a field she knew formed in her mind. Also a long time ago, but not so long, a creature lived here, in the time of the big lizards, but it was not one of them. Nothing like it is alive now. It was like nothing your kind have ever seen. One of them died and left its shape on a rock. I will show you the place, and you will be famed forever and always. She saw a nearby stream, and very quickly the image of something alive and impossibly strange. You humans have lived here for a short time. Mostly, you have bored me. Apart from the little jewels, some of you think there are secrets in the stones you see standing around. There are no secrets there. The people who put them there were all really the same people. They put them there because they were ashamed. They feared they had betrayed their mother when they began to plant things. The stones are also about things in the sky. Those people thought that having no secrets was a thing they called holiness. Their story was mainly dead babies, dead mothers, and not enough to eat. Only when the Celts came, some of them became interesting. Some of them would not submit. They hid in the high places and the woods. They slunk and pilfered besides the hill forts in the twilight. They reached through doorways in the night. They became slight and silent. They became living secrets. Some of your people have wondered if they were the ones you call the fairies. Know then, it was indeed so. They lingered longer than you would imagine. Briefly, an image of a hillside, a pathetic little cave, forgotten and overgrown with undergrowth, more a scrape in the ground, but hidden in the earth, flint tools, human bones, the remains of a fire, a tiny gold cross, Tudor coins. And tell the others, and be famed forever and always. If I could make my own little jewels, it would be for the Briganti, for the people of heaven. I hate the name Yorkshire, and the other names. I would have the here-ness of here called Brigantia, as once it was. Some of their priests knew things with the knowingness of known. They could see me and talk to me, and they gave me gifts, and one of these a gold image of my face, and the golden image of a wicker man, and I will show you the place where they are. The image of a hill appeared, and you shall be famed forever and always. I did not like the Romans when they were here, a short time ago. Even when I killed some of them on the high moors, they bored me. Only there was one who didn't. He was a man who made images by cutting stone, and he made an image of the goddess they called Venus. It is the greatest image of its kind ever made. He made it after the likeness of a girl he knew. He died soon after of the disease that now just makes marks on children's faces. It was young and fierce then. Not an image of the statue, but a series of other images formed in her mind. All the faces of the prettiest girls and women she'd ever seen. Her mother's face and blonde hair. Other impressions. Banquets of food. Curves, like the hills and plains of countries to be conquered. What men and boys saw when they looked. The statue is all that and more. When the followers of the god who hangs from a cross came, they wanted more than anything to smash it to pieces, but I went into the minds of the last priests at the temple where the church now stands in the village. They buried her before I made them go into the river, so they could not be made to tell. She is still there. The other part of the secret is that a few days ago, those who think there should be no pictures of the god on a cross were going to destroy the ones in the church. But the priest hid some of them. They are under a stone behind the altar, and one of the pictures is very like unto the picture of his face on an old cloth that is kept far from here. And when you show them, you shall be famed forever and always. They shall go down on their knees and simper, like the fools they are and have ever been. It showed her many other things. In the old woman's house, among the books, one called Love's Labour's Won. The man had done terrible things in the place called London. He called himself Jack. He wrote them down and put them in a bottle in a space in the chimney of the village inn, still there. Then he opened his veins in the bath. The pictures are of those from outside. Besides them, the complete book, the translation of the man called D. Many other things. 4. Finally, it was time to pay. Your mother didn't run away with another man, although that was her intention. Your father smashed her head in with a stone, and she is buried in the ground behind your home. As Susan paid, she saw that, although it couldn't weep, it could smile.
Well, looks like the price that Susan paid may have been slightly higher than she was expecting. Still, she has received all that she was promised. Fame forever and always, here in the Horror Story Corner. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, why not let Stephen know in the comments below? Thank you for listening, and as ever, sleep well.